Hello again. Today's going to be a short lecture, I'm happy to tell you. We've had a number of long ones lately, and we have a couple of films coming up in the next couple of weeks that are going to run considerably more than the hour we usually schedule for them. So I'm trying to make up for that by scheduling a few shorter lectures, and this is one of them. What I'd like to do today is really just to introduce you to the field of medical anthropology. For the past few lectures, we've been talking about ways that society constructs the self. As the ways that who you are is tied into larger ideas within the culture about what the world is. Now, for a lot of people, one of the biggest challenges to the sense of self is illness. Getting sick is usually uncomfortable, and it's sometimes painful, but the hardest part about it often is what it means for who we are. Right? When we're sick, we're not the active, engaged people in the world that we like to think of ourselves as being. We often find ourselves becoming passive, even helpless, dependent on other people, and forced to wait for a healing process that we can't control. The more severe the illness is, the more powerful the challenge is. To have a stroke, for example, is to have your basic assumptions about your relationship to the world turned upside down. Things that you took for granted suddenly change utterly, and the world around you is suddenly different in the blink of an eye. In some cases, people lose the ability to speak, or to write, or to construct certain kinds of sentences, and their relationships with the people close to them are suddenly radically transformed. Sometimes things change that wouldn't have even occurred to you even exist. Back when we were young parents, my wife fell very ill and had a minor stroke, and among the problems it produced was an inability to intuitively judge volume. She could have two glasses of water sitting in front of her, right? One of them right next to each other, one of them a quarter full and one of them 3/4 full. And as long as she was looking at them, she knew that one of them had more in it. But if they were placed out of sight and she had to think of them rather than look at them, she had no consciousness whatsoever that one was fuller than the other. As it turns out, the ability to judge volume intuitively is a mental process, one that can be interrupted if your brain is injured. Who knew? But from that point forward, for a number of years, a basic part of her connection with the world around her was thrown off. Now, illness is something that comes to all of us sooner or later. And so it's one of the basic challenges that we face as we try to figure out who we are within the culture. And the study of that occurs primarily within the field of medical anthropology. Medical anthropology really has two sides to it. On the one hand, medical anthropology is a branch of what we sometimes call applied anthropology. That is the effort to use anthropological insights to address concrete human problems in the real world. Applied anthropologists in business, for example, try to use what anthropology has discovered about human groups and human communication to help companies and workplaces function better, and to help people address some of the problems of cultural diversity that come up in our increasingly diverse workplaces. Applied anthropologists in policy studies apply some of the insights from political anthropology to help human rights groups and NGOs do a better job of promoting democracy and social justice around the world. In archaeology, applied anthropologists use their knowledge of the ways that people create settlements and even create garbage to get a better sense of how to interpret the material culture that we create today. Now, medical anthropology, from one perspective, tries to do the same thing with medicine. How can the insights of anthropology help us to build better hospitals? Places where people from different cultures can be treated effectively and diagnosed accurately. What sorts of cultural dynamics keep some people from getting good care? Are there places in our society where people are having substandard medical treatment, not because the resources aren't there, but because our biomedical system doesn't know how to interact with their local cultures and values? In other words, how can the knowledge of anthropology help our medical system and medical systems in other parts of the world to do a better job of improving people's lives? The other side of medical anthropology is a more theoretical one. It asks, what exactly do we mean by health? Different cultures have different ideas about what a healthy human body is. They have different ideas about what men and women are, about what adults and children are, about the connection between the world we can see and the world we can't see. That means that health and illness aren't just things that are out there in the world. They're things that cultures create. What it means to be healthy is that there is a correspondence between your individual experience and what your particular culture defines as a properly functioning human organism. Sickness, likewise, is something that can only be understood within a specific cultural context. Now, with that in mind, medical anthropology asks questions about what cultures mean by health and sickness. How are ideas about the body and the mind and the relationship to society developed and transmitted? How do those differ among cultures? How do they change over time? And are there any things about the body and health that are universally understood in the same way? In a sense, medical anthropology takes the kinds of questions that we ask about subsistence and gender, ethnicity, religion, and applies them to the world of health and illness. Now, in our time today, I'd like to do just two things. First, we're going to talk about a couple of the key terms that pop up when you're looking at medical anthropology and some of the complexities that are involved in defining them. Second, we're going to look at the effects of differing concepts of the body and the spirit world on the treatment of behavioral illnesses.